Good morning. Welcome to our Wednesday class. Like I told you on Monday, I have just a couple of videos I want to show you to kind of help reinforce some of the concepts we were talking about Monday in our lecture. But first, I want to make sure that this is recording like it's supposed to be. There we go. And yep, it's working fine. So, just as a reminder, this is week 15. You have a discussion, and the initial post is due Friday by 11:59 p.m. And you need to reply to two classmates by Sunday at 11:59 p.m. And if I can hit the back button, there we go. You have your final project outline, which is due Sunday by 11:59 p.m. So now with the announcements out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into our first video on ethical leadership.
Ethical leadership can take different forms. Ethical leadership can be defined differently. And if you look at the research, it is defined. Responsible leadership, ethical leadership, transformational leadership. These are all components of ethical leadership, but there are some, I think, underpinnings of that. And it's sort of what we've talked about for me. The first is a willingness to engage with the broader stakeholder community and to understand and listen to their needs, and not just listen to it, but actually figure out how that impacts your business, um, and how it impacts you as a person, but more importantly, how does that work with the business? And then do something about that. To me, that's number one, is this understanding the broader stakeholder community. The second is being authentic. Um, and that's a loaded word, I think, nowadays, but for me, authentic is being self-reflective, being self-aware, being transparent in how you interact with that broader stakeholder community, um, in an honest, straightforward answer. To me, that's being. And I think in today's environment, today's world, inauthentic leadership, inauthentic people uh, become pretty transparent. I think after a while. The other thing is really what we talked about: empathy, humility, and compassion. I think are all components of being an ethical leader. Um, I've studied a lot around transformational leadership, um, and versus say transactional leadership, which is really that command and control. Do it my way. I don't need to have your feedback. Um, some of the components of transformational leadership that I think really go to ethical leadership is this idea of engaging in a dialogue with your associates, with your employees, um, encouraging feedback and listening to that feedback, willing to communicate with um, with your employee base in again a transparent way, and then also being self-aware yourself. That how am I coming across? Am I being willing to do that? We at Magnetrol now with our leadership team, we have a monthly sit down where we go through, the obvious stuff. How's your business? What have you been doing well? We've shifted that more to a positive discussion, which includes what can I do for you? What do you need from me as the president to help you achieve your goals? What development opportunities are you looking to do? Um, that to me is part of ethical leadership, to say, I'm not here just to tell you what to do. I want to hear what you need and then address it. And we've tried to start rolling that down throughout our management ranks to that. And then I think the final thing is really just it's sort of symbolism too, right? Part of ethical leadership is I'm not a big fan of this expression because I think it gets overused, but walking the talk. It's one thing to say we're going to be transparent. It's one thing to say we're going to understand your needs. But if I'm doing things that are counter to that, if I have management that's doing things that are counter to that, to me that sort of gets rid of the ethical component of that. You're sending a mixed message. The final thing I would say, because I've studied this a lot, is what I'll call the opposite of ethical leadership, and that's leaders who just don't want to be engaged. The leaders that turn away from their responsibility and just say everybody else handle it. I think that is the purest form of unethical leadership for me, is to just walk away. And if you have that in an organization, you've got to take care of that. Leaders have got to be involved. It's hard work. I always tell people leadership is hard. Leadership requires work because you have got to be engaged with your employees. It goes back to that process. And for me, it's unethical if you refuse to take on that work, to take on that challenge, and to actually have dialogue with folks, because it can get messy. It can get hard when your employees are asking for stuff that you can't do. It's easy just to say, well, we can't do that, so just go back to work, rather than saying, well, let's talk it through. Now, we may not get together on this result, but it takes work to actually sit there and lead and listen.
If you notice, there's a few things, well, actually, most everything he mentioned, we've been talking about this semester. Empathy, transformational leadership, yeah, listening, being engaged as a leader, and not just with your employees, the internal stakeholders, but with the external stakeholders, the community. I think that really an ethical leader does. I agree with this gentleman. I agree that ethical leadership requires you to be very proactive in your approach to dealing with your stakeholders. So we have one more video to watch. Let me get that keyed up here. And this one is on personal values, morals, ethics, and how do they relate to decision making.
Morals and ethics influence decision making. That might be obvious. There's a psychological model that'll help us to understand that. What I'm about to share with you is a model that we use in the Nova Principles program, which is taught in the schools by uniformed law enforcement officers to help kids make good decisions. This is not just about staying away from drugs, for example, although that's one application. This is about...
Well, that was short-lived. Let's try this again here. Let me check my internet connection. It looks like everything's still good. Okay. Well, let's do this. Let me try this. Go back to here. Give me 1 second. Suddenly, I'm not signed into YouTube, and that's weird because I was signed in to YouTube. We just watched a video. I don't understand. Yes, it's me. It's always been me. And here, let's try it again.
How do personal values, morals, what I'm about, which is taught in the schools by uniformed law enforcement officers to help kids make good decisions. This is not just about staying away from drugs, for example, although that's one application. This is about making morally based decisions. And it has to do with the way our mind develops morally. The model to which I'm referring starts with a graph like this that plots control on this side against maturity down here. Control means control over your own life. And it goes from 0 down here at the bottom to 100% up here at the top. So you can have all of the control in your life or none of the control in your life or somewhere in between. And most of us have somewhere in between. Maturity is a really interesting concept. So as we shift to the topic of maturity, probably the most common way that we think about maturity is in terms of age, how old you are. Let's start with that. And we'll put birth over here on this side of the graph. When you're first born, how much control do you have over your own life? None. Well, a little. You can make a big noise and a big stink. But for the most part, you don't have a lot of control when you're first born. How about as an adult? How much control do you have on this end of the equation? Now, if you're an adult, you've probably got a little bit of small print going on in your own mind because you're thinking, well, there's some things that I don't really control. Yes, that is true. But when I ask teenagers, how much control do the adults have? What do you think they tell me? Oh, 100%. They got all of it. Well, let's just go with what they're saying for now, and we'll put the adult control clear up here. Near the top, at least. Between birth and adulthood, we gradually increase in our control so that the more mature we are, the more control we have. Now, that makes sense when we talk about age. But today we're talking about moral reasoning, which makes more sense to handle in terms of stage, not age. In fact, you want to say that with me? Stage, not age. You probably didn't say it. That's okay. Let's break this up into stages. So I'm going to take age out of the equation. We'll just erase that. And instead, we'll break this up into 3 stages. And the way that I've labeled these, I think it'll be pretty easy for you to remember. Stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. Isn't that brilliant? These are different stages of moral development. So stage 1 is the least mature. Stage 3 is the most mature. And at stage 3, you get to have the most control over your own life. Back to our title for a minute. How do personal values, morals, ethics influence decision making? What we do depends on what stage we're on in our own moral development. People who are at stage 1 tend to be very selfish, very self-centered. It's all about me, me, me. So they also tend to be demanding and manipulative, and they tend to throw little fits and temper tantrums. Now, 2-year-olds can do this, right? But so can 35-year-olds. How much maturity does it take to throw a tantrum? That's what stage 1 is all about. Now, when we move to stage 2, we stop fighting and start cooperating. People who are willing to cooperate, negotiate, work things out, come up with a win-win kind of a solution. Well, that's a whole lot easier to deal with. These people get to have more control in their life. When we move to stage 3, this is where we are truly responsible. And now our decisions are driven by morals and values and ethics. So here's how it ties back into our title for today. When you're on stage 1, you might do the right things occasionally.
Mom, can you come pick me up? I'm scared. I can't do this anymore. It's so stressful. Hey, sounds like you need some help. Have you ever heard of Grammarly? Oh.
But the reasons you do those right things is because there's something in it for me, or I'm going to get clobbered if I don't. That's the level of moral reasoning that's going on at stage one. You'll notice that at stage one, we have to have somebody else take most of the control because the internal control is so limited at that stage of moral development. Stage two people will do the right things for different reasons. At stage two, I'll do the right things because, well, life goes more smoothly when I do. I gotta work with people. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. This is the stage two, and it doesn't require as much external control because we've got it internally. Stage three, people on stage three do the right things for the right reasons. In the Nova Principles program, we call this true colors. What's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. And I have an internalized set of morals and ethics and values that drive that decision making. It has everything to do with our behavior. And notice this too. If we go back to the graph really quickly, the part on the top of this line is the part that other people need to take, primarily parents, but secondarily our society. It is a huge cost to society when we have adults out there who are thinking at a stage one of moral development. Stage two is more of a balance. Stage three is where we free up the resources of our communities because we have people in our communities who are making decisions based on those internalized standards and morals and values. I'm personally very grateful to Nova Principles.
All the way back to our very first week, when we have a single source that we draw our values and our ethics from, we can easily learn to be in that stage three. In that stage three, the locus of control in our life is primarily internal, it's intrinsic. But in stage one, and even in stage two, people are responding to a rewards and punishment system. They're operating almost under expectancy theory and motivation when it comes to decision-making and morals and ethics. In stage three, they've moved from the expectancy theory of motivation from that model into an equity model or a social justice model or something like that, where you're actually processing, the hard word to say, too many S's. You're going through the process of figuring out where you stand on things and making decisions based on that. I was speaking to a friend of mine yesterday. I meet with him on a fairly regular basis. We talk philosophy, and we were talking about some of these matters. And really it comes down to, are we content with ourselves? Or are we at war with ourselves? Or maybe we don't even know ourselves. So really, last week, this week, it's really a time for you to sit down and refresh yourself with yourself. Reintroduce yourself to who you are. And understand that your worldview does drive your morals and your ethics and your values. And that's fine. That's great. As a matter of fact, that's a huge benefit because now we go back to that single source. So I'm going to ask if anybody in the Zoom class has any questions. Those of you watching this video, you can email them to me. But does anybody have any questions today?
No, sir. Thank you very much.
All right. And
Nope.
okay. I will end with this. This is a philosophy course, and so we do get in some touchy subjects at times. I'm going to say right now that there are conflicts around this world that are based on people who made decisions from that level one zone. when we as a society can begin to make decisions in the level 3 zone, I think conflict can reduce. I think that we can mitigate conflict. We can resolve these issues. Because at the end of the day, it's not necessarily that there's one people group that's right and one people group that's wrong. It's usually, you can boil it down usually to a handful of people in leadership positions who are making decisions for the wrong reasons. So now that you've had this additional philosophy course, for those of you getting ready to graduate, for those of you getting ready to be a senior, use the skills that you've been learning this semester. We have one more week of class and then we're done with the term. So I'm going to let you go for the day, give you some time to do your other projects, whether for this class or other classes or whatever it is you need to do. You have a little extra time today. All right. You have a great day.
Thank you very much, sir. You too.
Thank you.